That was a fun night though, right?
That was great.
It was. You owe me a drink, Karen.
I do? I'm sure I do, Linda. Oh, because you left, right?
He did. Ooh.
You got it.
Sherry,
Okay, we're live. Sherry, you got on mute and you're sideways.
So today is April 24th, Monday, and this is the Finance Committee meeting of the Norwalk Board of Education. Do we need a motion to begin this meeting, Diane? I don't recall.
No, just say time and date.
So we are at 6:07 p.m. again on April 27th.
24th.
Oh, April 24th. Oh my goodness.
She's rushing the month.
No, my phone is a mess. I'm just, anyway, today's correction, April 24th. So let's begin the meeting. First item on the agenda.
So the first item is the monthly financials. I will share my screen. Usually I do send you a narrative report as well that accompanies the numbers. This month has been a bit wild with SPBs and budgets, and so I wasn't able to get to you the narrative, but I will get to you the narrative at the next meeting. So I'll just kind of talk through the numbers now. But you do have the report with you. So I am sharing my screen. Are you able to see this?
We're in your files.
Oh, you're in my files? Okay, so I should go here. There we go. Are you able to see it?
Yes.
Okay. So this is a summary of our general fund. The first page are the overall summaries of the objects, and the pages behind it are the individual line items that make up the totals on the first page. So I'll just kind of walk through this page, talk about what I see are some things worthy of pointing out. And then if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer. So the first part of this is obviously our salaries, which make up the biggest proportion of our budget. So as of March, we are about 9 months in, about 75% of the year. And therefore, one way to look at it is this bottom number where it says percent of the budget spent. We spent about 69% of the total budget, 75% of the year having elapsed. So trending wise, we're actually trending well, consistent with where we would be this time of year, because we're at 69, whereas we've spent 75. We do have balloon payments for teachers during the summer, so that salaries and benefits number typically will spike in June when we make that balloon payment for the teachers that we distribute over the 3 months. But even with that balloon payment, this is where we would anticipate to be throughout the year. We're at about 66% of the salaries budget spent, 75% of the year. Correspondingly, we're at about 74% of the benefits. And what we do with the benefits, because we have a separate health insurance fund, and so the benefits really accounts for the transfers from the general fund into the health insurance fund where we pay out the benefits. And we make those transfers in 4 quarterly installments throughout the year. So this time of year, we should be at 75%, we're just at 75%. So that just reflects those quarterly transfers. And then we make the final transfer mid-June, and that typically would get us to about 100% because we transfer the full amount into that fund. Professional services, we're at about 65% of the budget. Again, this is consistent. These are those professional contracts that we have with various vendors for various services that are provided to the Board of Ed. And again, we're at 65% of the year. You will see that over last year, we're at about 38%. of spend where we were this time compared to last year. Again, this is really just those contracts that are, that we have in place. And there again, it's trending the way that we would anticipate that to trend. Property services accounts for contracted services that are related to our property upkeep, custodial services, maintenance of our facilities. Those fall under property services. And again, we're at 81% of budget. Most of these are annual contracts that we pay over a 12-month period. So they're consistently trending as we would anticipate them to trend. Other services are services that are not categorized as either professional or property. And again, those are at 81%, 75% of the year having gone through. We do have a number of these services that we pay upfront at the beginning of the year. And therefore, as we go throughout the year, it kind of levels out to match where we are in the year. Supplies and materials are just general supplies that we buy for things throughout the districts. You can see that on the $8.9 million budget, we've actually spent only about 50% of these supplies. Again, some of these purchases are seasonal as we go into the summer months. May and June, we do see an uptick, particularly for supplies related to our summer programs. And so we would see that uptick during the summer months. But again, this is trending where we would anticipate the trend. No cause for alarm there. Equipment are just various equipment we buy throughout the district, laptops, computers, those types of things that are not funded through the capital budget. And again, those are where we would anticipate them to trend at about 60%. It's actually down from where we were this time last year. And then the last two other objects, these are just miscellaneous other items that don't fall into any of those categories. It is a relatively low number. It's about 200,000 or so. Of that 200,000, we've spent about 140, which is 65% of the budget. The only thing that I did want to highlight, and I will scroll to that page, is on page 5 under other services. You will see that student transport is at 98% spent for the year. And the reason that that is so high is these are fixed contracts. And last year we were actually behind in making some of these payments. So last year, this time, we only made about $6.6 million worth of payments compared to the 9.2 we made this year. Part of that is just the transportation team being proactive. We did pay a big chunk of that contract at the beginning of the year rather than phase it out in 12 months because we know that it's a fixed contract. And so it was just easier to encumber the dollars and then to just pay a higher proportion of the year. And then it just kind of levels out throughout the year. But overall, in terms of where we are on the budget, we are where we anticipate we would be. As I mentioned before, the one item that we are watching closely is related to our special education expenses. As I mentioned at the last meeting, our goal is to fully fund all of our special education within the current budget, even though they're trending higher. Any savings that we can accumulate in these other lines, we will be transferring those to the special education items. And you've been seeing those as the transfers come through. We recently did at the last meeting a series of transfers. We transferred about 300,000 into that line. If there aren't any other questions, well, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time before I give you an update on the FY24 budget development.
Well, everything is pretty self-explanatory. It looks like, as you've indicated, that everything is pretty much trending the way that it should. You noted that what's jumping out at you a little bit is some of the special education costs that may bubble up. Is there anything in particular that you see that may bubble up related to that? Or you're just speaking in general terms?
No, I think the one thing that we're watching is obviously the out of district.
Right.
A component of that is the out of district tuition and just the number of students that we have that we're sending out of district. As we've shared before, a combination of the number of students that are going and the cost of those services. Right. We are also seeing challenges in recruiting personnel, RBTs, and those types of individuals. And therefore, we're having to contract out those services.
Right.
And those contracted services, just because the demand is so high,
Has
those
gone-
expenses have gone up as well. And so those are the main drivers of
Which
the
is
budget.
something that we've been talking about all along, right? So that,
Correct, yes.
nothing new there. Okay. Does anybody else have any questions or comments?
No questions, but I'm not sure what's going on Lunda's end, because I don't know if it's me or she keeps cutting in and out.
Yeah,
Are
it
you
dropped
getting-
for me a minute ago too, Diana. Linda did.
Oh, my apologies.
I thought it was me.
No, it's evidently, I'm in the office, so I'm not sure what is going on with the internet.
What I just realized, I didn't call the approval of the minutes. Should we backtrack and have someone make a motion to do that, or should we just proceed?
We can proceed and do it at the end. I didn't see it on the agenda really written out, but yeah, we could do it at the end. I was gonna remind you to do it at the end.
Thank you.
So we're good.
Okay. So Mr. Osmani, if you want to continue, if there's no other questions or comments from anyone.
Okay, so briefly, I want to give you an update on the budget and where we are. So I just have 2 slides. This is obviously a cover slide for the budget. But I do want to spend some time kind of talking at where we are. Can you see this chart?
Yes.
Okay. So essentially right now we are at that reconciliation of the budget. The BT tentatively approved the budget that was recommended by the mayor at 4%, even though the Common Council had set a cap allowing them to provide additional $1 million to the Board of Ed. They have not, they kept it at the 4%. They do meet for their final meeting. I believe it's on Monday, and that's when the final budget will be set. But currently, we are at that 4%, which is a 226.5 million number that you see at the bottom. So in terms of reconciliation, what happens between now and June, when we bring the budget back to you, is one, we reconcile what we receive from the city and what we have requested, while also going through our school-based, student-based budget, which is what we're going through now. So we started the current year, our budget is 217 million. Our initial request was 245 million, and we received 226. And so the difference are these negative numbers that we have to make up for the difference. As we went through the budget process, in the governor's budget proposal, we did get news that there is about an additional $1.6 million in state grants that are coming to the Board of Ed. And so what we hope to do is some of that 245 million that we had planned to use local dollars on, we can redirect some of those expenses towards grants to the tune of 1.6 million. What we had also discussed was last year when we had set the budget, we had planned to use some carryover funds for this current fiscal year, primarily for the South Norwalk School, if you recall, and also for the increased health insurance costs that we received late in the budget process. What we're seeing is because of the turnover and some of the vacancy rates that we've seen, we'll probably be able to meet our health insurance expenses from what was approved within the budget. So we wouldn't necessarily need to tap into those rollover funds to cover for the health insurance. And so what we anticipate is there will be about $2.5 billion from those rollover funds that we can repurpose and apply those to the current FY24 budget. So between the 1.6 and the 2.5, there's about $4.1 million or so that we can redirect towards the current budget. That still does leave us with a significant gap between the ask and where we were. And so right now what we're looking at is On the school-based side, we kind of split it in half, that half of those anticipated reductions will come from the school-based budget side. And then another 7.4 million, or half of that, from the non-school, which includes central office and centralized expenses that we pay centrally, like special education curriculum that are funded separately. So where we are right now in the process is we're in week 1 of week 3 of having conversations with the school and reviewing their budgets. We started with the elementary schools. We conclude the elementary schools, I believe, this week. And then we begin middle schools. And by the end of next week, following week, we'll have completed elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools. Concurrently, we are also looking back at our centralized budgets, including central office and those centralized services such as special education, to see where we can make those additional reductions to balance the budget, so that at the end of the day, our budget needs to be 226.5. As you heard from the last BET meeting, and I think at the Common Council meeting, we continue to work with the mayor. He has indicated that he is also looking at some alternative ways of funding the budget and allowing us to meet the expenses. So that's not included in here. Where I think the number he mentioned was somewhere between 1.5 and 2.5 million dollars. So we're working with the mayor's office to provide him a list of the items that could be included in that 2.5. And so if that does come true, then I would have another savings or offsets of 2.5 million that would kind of help some of these other reductions that we're looking at in the budget. But we hope that by mid-May, we will have concluded the school budgets and also the centralized services budgets, and we'll have a number that we can present to you. Here's where we are. Kristen and Joe Nicolia have been taking the lead in working with the schools. Kristen, I don't know if you have any additional updates, perhaps maybe kind of share how those meetings have been going. We've all been participating in them, but you've been kind of crunching those numbers with the schools, while I've been crunching the numbers on the central office side. So maybe just give us an update on how those meetings are going so far. You're on mute.
Hi, everyone. Right, like Linda said, we're hyper-focused on the school-based budget meetings right now. We have a cross-functional team meeting on each one. So we're making sure we touch all the pieces, finance, school leadership, HR, grants, and obviously the principal and assistant principal are part of those meetings. We calculated the per pupil by level, taking out the reductions, the targeted reductions we thought we needed at each level, which Linda just reviewed with you. So we're tying to that target and also, trying to really look at what the needs are and pare them down so we can hit these significant budgeted cuts that we're on the hook for this year. So far, so good. Everyone's very collaborative and we're working to solve the budget. We have 2 more weeks of student-based budget and hopefully we'll be able to hit the targets that Linda had showed you.
So-
Do you have any questions for us?
So that 4.1 that you're talking about would be added to the 226, obviously, right? That the city has
No,
approved.
so of the 220, so basically it would come out of the 245.
Okay,
So we initially requested 245, and what we're saying is 1.6, the 4.1, we
right.
can fund through grants, and so that brings that number to like 241.
Gotcha.
And these other numbers make up the 226. So
And then you
226
said
is our cap.
And then you said that the mayor had noted another 2.5?
He gave us a range. He said somewhere between 1.5 and 2.5. There are some restrictions in terms of
Right.
what that money can be applied towards. Initially, we thought that maybe we could apply it towards some contracted services, but there were challenges with that because the contracts are between the Board of Ed and the third party and not necessarily with the city. And so that wasn't something that we could do. So he has asked us to look at maybe there's like supplies related to our operations or health or those types of things. So we're putting together a list for him and his team to review and give us feedback whether that meets the criteria. Because I think what they're planning to do is to use some of their COVID pandemic grants. And so there are also some restrictions in terms of what those dollars can be spent on. So we're trying to kind of meet them with those requirements and also meet the need of the Board of Ed.
I mean, how confident are you that we'll be able to find something like that though, right? I mean,
I was
Yeah,
just
well, I
gonna
mean,
ask,
yeah.
that's not a definite.
It's not a definite, and that's why you don't see it in the numbers that I present. I
Mhm.
think if it happens, it will be a welcome relief to us. But for now, we're operating under the assumption that you have in front of you. But if that does come true, it will definitely relieve some of these numbers in parentheses that you're seeing.
I think it's also important that, for the public, if they're listening, that the reductions to the balance request, where you're talking about the 4 high schools and the middle schools and the elementary, that it is a discussion with the schools. It's not a discussion, it's not just a decision made by the finance team, but that the principals and everybody definitely gets involved in these conversations.
Correct. It's the school leaders. They're also engaging with the SGCs. We preliminary presented to the SGCs, I think back in January. And we are also meeting with the SGCs. There's an upcoming workshop in May where we will provide some additional context to the SGCs. But the SGCs are working with their respective principals on this as well.
Thank you.
are there any more questions or comments? Cara, do you have any concerns?
I do not.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I wanted to kind of loop back to the approval of the minutes. Does someone want to make a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting?
Motion, Diana.
So I will second the motion, but I think I need to recuse myself on the approval because I wasn't at that meeting.
Okay.
Okay. I don't have any changes or corrections.
Nor do I.
Okay.
So those minutes have been approved.
Yes.
And if there's not any more comments, questions, concerns, we can adjourn. We ready? Does anybody have any other? Linda, thank you for your continued work with this budget going forward.
You're welcome. We're almost there.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you. And to Kristen too.
absolutely. You guys are doing the yeoman's work, I tell you.
Team effort.
Appreciate it. Hopefully, there'll be a different plan in place next year and we'll be able to go through this in a more simple fashion. I really would like to see that. I don't know if it will happen, but I would like to see that. But anyway, thank you. I'm going to will Diana, would somebody make a motion to adjourn? Diana, Karen, make a motion? It is 6:29.
Motion to adjourn.
Sounds good. Thank you, everybody.
Time
Thanks,
up.
everybody.
Good night.